If you look at the recent history of role-playing games, there's a common trend among them. They almost all follow the same formula. Somewhere along the way, we as gamers and game developers developed a common understanding of what makes up the key ingredients of a traditional RPG. Familiar character classes like wizards, paladins, and barbarians, each with skills that follow the same theme. A character sheet and equipment to slot it into that gets progressively better as you level up. Speaking of leveling up, a leveling system where you earn experience from combat combined with stats that represent your character's prowess and combat, which has abilities that feed off of those stats. And don't forget a narrative, epic quest where you start from a lowly serf or criminal, only to be elevated to Neo-level greatness and slay the dragon / wizard / corrupt king and save the world. These all tend to make up the recipe. The holy grail that is Dungeons & Dragons exemplifies this recipe, and modern RPGs have gotten really good at replicating that formula. Just like eating your favorite food every day though, playing the same role-playing game again and again risks getting, well, stale. Which is the fundamental problem at hand. RPG games, if they only follow the same formula, are at risk of stagnating, which is how genres die. Now, don't get me wrong, Baldur's Gate 3 is amazing. That's not my point. My point is that if every RPG that comes out plays like Baldur's Gate 3, even if it was equally as excellent as that game is, it would get boring. Take Dragon's Age Veilguard. It's an RPG which ticks all the boxes, but it does nothing that makes it stand out from the rest. In fact, it feels like they tried so hard to be a good RPG that they neutered themselves in the process. So today, I want to take a moment to celebrate some of the modern RPGs that eschew the formula, that still feel uncannily like role-playing games that we, as gamers, have come to be so deeply fond of. I want to celebrate the games that are pushing the genre forward, the out-of-the-box games which can still walk that line, giving us a taste of what's coming and of where we're going, without abandoning everything that's come before. These games are making attempts at solving the problem of formulaic RPGs. I want to talk about the modern versions of Planescape Torment, Earthbound, and Daggerfall, the games that are breaking the mold. If you were to list out the features of Disco Elysium on paper, they would look like every other RPG release. Class choice at start, skill tree, character inventory, stat system, branching dialogue. That list, it checks all the boxes. Yet everything about this dark dive into the broken psyche of a drug-addled detective eschews the norms of the genre, while at once embracing its structure. It does this by holistically embracing its theme for every system. The skill tree on its surface appears relatable to what we are comfortable with. Core stats with a number of sub-specializations. Once past this veneer though, as you're asked to make a choice, you quickly begin to realize how foreign everything is. With options like Inland Empire and Shivers presented next to the more relatable Endurance and Perception, you're kept in a state of hesitancy and confusion. A place where you feel like you understand, but you really don't. Almost a state of mild anxiety and disorientation, just like the main character. The lack of detail in the skills is a part of what makes this work. Without a clear memory or perfect information, you and the character must make decisions that impact who you are and what you do, both in the narrative tree and your skills. Though this design choice of intentional ambiguity leads some players to frustration, it's also a choice which adds more to the system overall for those willing to embrace that discomfort. It leans on your interpretation of the skill, hoping for you to create a character that you understand based on inference and therefore relate to or possibly aspire to. There's an instinct you must use when making your choice. And as you play the game, those choices are reinforced as your skill checks play out. With its lack of notable combat systems, the inclusion of physical skills may seem out of place, until you consider how most tie to a psychological element. Your pain threshold, fight or flight response, and inclination to drug abuse are all presented as choices which impact your physical success chance, but with an underlying connection to a mental or emotional element. And though, on occasion, these skills do directly relate to obstacles in the game, for the most part, the way these skills benefit you or your choices have a layer of obfuscation to them. Certainly, it feels like your chance at success does increase as you invest in certain skills, yet the roll of the dice is just that, a truly random roll of the dice. The real glory of the skill tree in Disco Elysium is just how far they've veered away from the normal, comfortable space of +1 to strength into a deeply rich and connected array of choices that reflect the challenging mental state of the main character. Then there's the thought cabinet system. While many rightfully draw analogies to the more traditional perk or passive talent tree, Elysium's thought cabinet system has some very interesting concepts that make it stand apart. Once more, they accomplish this by leaning heavily on the theme of what happens when we have thought. A traditional perk or talent system has the player performing some unrelated action for a while in the game to earn that reward. For example, killing creatures to earn XP, which gives you some arbitrary talent point. The thought cabinet, however, connects the unlocking directly with the theme. Just like a thought, players are given them seemingly spontaneously. To unlock the thought, they must choose to focus on it for some period of time. Once the thought is being focused on, there's really nothing to do but wait. To continue playing the game until the thought unlocks, revealing itself and its benefit to you, at which point you can hold onto it or discard it. On top of this, you could choose to ignore the thought cabinet entirely and still finish the game. While most talent tree or perk systems are tightly woven into the balance of combat or other systems, and would expect players to have chosen them to progress, the thought cabinet is, functionally, entirely optional. Yes, there's power tied here, but overall it's not critical to engage with. If you want to roleplay as a thoughtless drug addict, you certainly can. The beauty of Disco Elysium is how it's all tied into one holistic thematic package. On their own, the skill tree or thought cabinet system would be out of place in a more traditional RPG. Sure, maybe you could shoehorn in the thought system, but a skill system with the choices that allows you to engage in discourse with your tie only works when connected with the grander theme.
No one is saying that! No one is saying that Ty can talk! That would be ludicrous!
This aligning with the theme is what makes Disco Elysium such a masterpiece. It embraces its nature across all its systems to immerse you in the world. Kingdom Come Deliverance, both the first and second, are also games which do an incredible job of immersing you in a world. These are titles which, beyond being modern open-world RPGs, prioritize exploration and freedom of choice, breaking free from the traditional linearity of most recent role-playing games. While some may consider it to be pretty hardcore, the recent success of the sequel speaks volumes for how much desire there is amongst the audience for a game which embraces that which has many systems that can be manipulated and interact in surprising ways with each other. Whether it's the crime and punishment system, the way you can choose to complete quests in a variety of different ways, or how those choices impact the conclusion of the narrative, all of these systems tie together to create a true role-playing game, while also pushing away from the formulaic. The alchemy or blacksmithing systems are great examples of this. Most games in the genre would use a simple user interface to allow you to craft potions or new weapons. Deliverance goes all in. Alchemy has you collecting herbs and drying them, recipes and ingredients from an apothecary, a full skill tree related to it, to the full gameplay revolving around actually brewing the potions themselves. Even describing these as minigames doesn't do them justice, as they could practically stand alone as games themselves. Not only is this testament to the game embracing its immersiveness, it's showing and understanding that games need a variety of intensities. This type of play, repetitive with a small amount of challenge associated with it, puts players in almost a meditative state. The overall challenge is low, and it allows players to just get into a groove, allowing them to feel like they're making progress and being rewarded, as well as contributing to their future success. Games need systems like this. Maybe not every game needs something as complex as alchemy here, but the larger titles, say Destiny, would all benefit from a more relaxed type of gameplay. These give players variety. Continually diving into combat becomes exhausting, and players need to take a break. Because most games don't provide gameplay that allows for that break, players inevitably get tired and leave the game. Here though, with the alchemy system as an option, players can take a day to just make potions. They stay connected to the game rather than leaving and going to do something different. And if you look across Deliverance, you see this variety of systems in droves. This ramping up and down of different intensities, from conversing with other characters, to lockpicking, to the inevitable and unique combat, allows players to pace out their experience. It gives the game a sense of unique progress that the player is in control of. Games like this, sure, they have many of the traditional RPG systems, but each of those systems allows the player to engage in it in different ways. It sets a different intensity, and that ties well to the progression in the game. Starting as a lowly, almost useless serf and growing over time in waves of various intensity to become the hero. Kenshi, of course, embraces this same formula for progression. Now, Kenshi probably deserves its own video. Honestly, I barely even know where to start with this one. Kenshi is a standout example of how to create a variety of systems that have the potential to interact with each other and simply allowing the player to discover what's possible. Of all the RPGs out there, it likely eschews the traditional formula the most. Except for an exceedingly simple tutorial, it barely gives the player any guidance. It leans in the most on just giving the player the controls and saying, mate, figure it out. In a world of over-polished, over-smoothed out games, Kenshi stands apart and shows us that players are willing and more than able to deal with bad graphics in the name of great gameplay. Where most games are entirely on rails, where even supposedly open world games are simply map indicators telling you what point of interest to travel to next to repeat the same formulaic encounter, Kenshi is something which creates a simulation of all these intertwined crazy systems and shoves the player into it, Sparta style. It's honestly hard to hone in on just one system in Kenshi that can act as an example of this. Like I said, Kenshi probably deserves its own entire video. If you'd like that, let me know in the comments below. These games and more, like Outward, Svarog Stream, Stone Shard, or Drover, all encourage players to think outside the box, to think differently, promoting critical thinking and creative problem solving. And that's why we enjoy them. They don't allow us to simply sit back and follow the rails. The developers aren't interested in giving us something that's cookie cutter or traditional. They want us to engage with them. They want us to solve the problems that they put in front of us. And they respect us enough to be smart enough to actually use those systems and tools to play the game. And that's the real beauty of role-playing games. Back to Dungeons & Dragons again. The handbook wasn't about creating a fixed, strict set of rules to follow like a choose-your-own-adventure book. It was about providing a set of rules and systems that could be combined by players in wild and creative ways to solve problems presented to them by the dungeon master. That's what these games accomplish. They give the players options. They invite the player into the game and embrace what might come of that. Whether it's the potentially radically strange characters that Disco Elysium allows you to create by obscuring their skills and thought system, the way Kingdom Come Deliverance embraces its immersiveness, or how Kenshi is, well, Kenshi. They all encourage the players to play a role beyond a simple narrative. And we need more games like this. Systemic games which encourage players to explore, to solve, to break it, are the way forward for innovation in the RPG space. Yes, there'll always be room for focused, narrative-driven and linear experiences, but the ones which will actually move the genre forward are the ones which lean into the systemic, emergent nature of RPGs. That's what players wanted from games like Starfield, or why Star Citizen continues to enthrall such a unique audience. It's why Elder Scrolls, if it ever comes out, generates such buzz. It's because players want these kinds of games, which feel like a toy box of different systems which we can explore and engage in. And if you haven't tried these games, but you love RPGs, I highly encourage you to explore them and experience the genre in a whole new way. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like, please do subscribe, comment, notification, all that YouTube jazz. But for now though, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.